Well, to talk more about this, let's bring in Felix Light from the Moscow Times. Felix, how is the collapse of the Soviet Union being seen there in Russia?
Well, hi, Jeannie. It's a fantastic question. It's a very, very intricate question in many ways. On the one hand, kind of today is almost one of about 4 or 5 different dates that could plausibly be that fall of the Soviet Union. Of course, the red flag stayed flying over the Kremlin until the 25th of December. So it was a rather drawn out process. And what we've really seen throughout this year of anniversaries, is very much a kind of a revanchist kind of sentiment coming out of the Kremlin and coming out of loyalist media. And this generally, I think, reflects kind of public opinion in Russia. Putin, of course, several years ago, famously called the collapse of the USSR the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century, and that indeed is the sentiment of emotion put forward in the Duma, Russia's parliament today. And I think in general, this kind of coincides or at least agrees with public sentiment, I think, here. What we see is even if a majority of people don't want to live under communism or return to the Soviet Union, they do certainly regret the collapse of the Soviet Union. And that certainly is the Russian, I think, position. Of course, people in the 15 other republics you mentioned have very, very different views and contest the fall. But I think definitely these anxieties and these rivaling interpretations of the fall really are played out in what we see today on the international stage. These tensions that we see between the West and Russia over Ukraine now are crucially important. Of course, if we go back 30 years, the fate of Ukraine was really at the center of these negotiations in Almaty in Kazakhstan. Boris Yeltsin, the Russian president at the time, was clear that no union could be preserved if Ukraine were not involved in it. And I think the extraordinary prominence of Ukraine in international relations in matters concerning Russia in recent years really reflects this inflated importance of Ukraine in the Russian imagination and in the the settlement that emerged after 1991.
Right, because you mentioned Ukraine, which in many ways, and maybe people don't realize this, it was 30 years ago after all, but in a lot of ways, it was really the starting point of what happened in December 1991.
It was, of course. There was an independence referendum at the start of December 1991 where Ukraine voted overwhelmingly for independence. Even the what we now understand as the pro-Russian areas of Ukraine, Crimea, which has been occupied for 7 years now, and of course the Donbass, where a pro-Russian separatist movement is controls that territory. But this was very much the final nail in the coffin for the Soviet Union. And when we see Vladimir Putin, who this year wrote an extraordinary 5,000-word essay about the historical unity of Russians and Ukrainians. We see the enormous importance of the question of Ukraine in all these kind of issues around the Soviet collapse and in Russia's sense of itself today. Ukraine is hugely important as a historical icon for many Russian historians and for Russian politicians. And so I think this is very much, the roots of the current crisis that we see with massive Russian military buildups on the Ukrainian border really have their roots in this rather obscure treaty signed in Kazakhstan 30 years ago.
Felix, thanks for that. Felix Light from the Moscow Times. Thanks.